My name is Ruth Emerson, and sometimes I think my whole life can be measured by the walls of a single house, the one my parents bought in Hamilton Creek, Colorado, long before I ever learned how to walk. It was a wide brick house with a wraparound porch, a slow-creaking wooden swing, and windows that caught the morning sun, as if they owned it. My parents never changed much about it, even when they could afford to. They said the house had character, and that character deserved to remain untouched. They always talked about handing it down to me someday, and even though the legal papers were never transferred, they made it clear that the house was emotionally mine. Growing up in those rooms made me believe in safety, in promises, in stability. Maybe that's why I fell for Garrett Hale in the first place, because he seemed safe. Or maybe I just wanted someone to share that feeling with. When I married Garrett, I truly believed we were building a life together. We moved to Bentonville, Ohio, into a 2-story home with pale blue shutters and a little patch of yard I tried to fill with roses. I thought that house would become our own symbol of safety, the way my parents' home had been for me. Garrett always claimed he loved it, even though he never lifted a finger to fix anything or help me decorate. Still, I convinced myself that marriage took patience, that people showed love in different ways, and that we would grow into something solid. But on our 7th anniversary, everything I believed broke apart in one single moment. Garrett came home carrying a long, silver-wrapped box with a bow that shimmered in the soft light of our living room lamp. For a second, my heart warmed. I thought he had remembered what day it was, that he was finally showing me the affection I kept waiting for. He smiled, an unusual smile, sharp at the edges, and handed me the box as if he were presenting me with something priceless. I held it in my hands, feeling the weight of it, imagining a bracelet, maybe a necklace, maybe even a handwritten letter with real emotion in it. But when I pulled off the ribbon and opened the box, my breath stopped. Inside were divorce papers. For a moment, I didn't even understand what I was looking at. My brain refused to place that cold, legal language next to the soft idea of love and anniversaries. Then the words registered, hitting me like ice water poured straight into my chest. My hands began to shake. I could barely breathe. I looked at Garrett, waiting for him to laugh, waiting for him to tell me it was a prank, a dark joke, something, anything, other than what it appeared to be. But he didn't laugh. He just stood there, smiling as if he had delivered a punchline, and I was too slow to get it. Then, without even waiting for me to speak, he tossed another envelope into my lap. It made a soft thud against my dress, but the sound felt painfully loud in the quiet room. "Those," he said calmly, "are the house papers, with your signature." He crossed his arms, almost proud of himself. "See? You already gave me the house before the divorce. I don't need you anymore." For a moment, everything inside me just fell apart. The house he was talking about wasn't the one we lived in. He meant the house in Hamilton Creek, the house my parents had built their lives around, the house that had shaped my childhood. The one thing in the world that felt like a piece of my soul. He wanted that house. He always wanted that house. The way he spoke, the way he smirked, the way he folded his arms like a man who had already won. I saw the truth. He acted as if he had gained something worth millions. And in his eyes, he had. My parents' house was valued at $680,000, a number he had repeated many times over the years as if it was his favorite fact. But then came the moment that changed everything, the moment that pulled me out of shock and back into myself. I looked him straight in the eyes and felt a strange calm settle into my voice. "Garrett," I said slowly, "the house isn't in my name." His smile vanished. I watched the color drain from his face, watched the confidence melt away like snow under sunlight. He looked down at the papers in my lap, flipping through them as if the words might rearrange themselves into something different. His mouth fell open slightly. His fingers trembled. "You what?" he whispered. "It's still in my parents' name," I said again. "I never signed anything. You forgot that." For a long moment he didn't speak. The room felt frozen. Even the air seemed to stop moving. Then, after a few seconds that felt like hours, he tried to laugh. It came out thin and shaky. "Ruth, it was a joke," he said too quickly. "Just a stupid joke." I thought you'd find it funny. A joke. That was the best he could come up with. He tried to sit beside me, but I moved away. His cologne smelled sharp, almost sour. I could see the panic behind his eyes, the way his mind was scrambling, trying to rewrite the meaning of everything he had just done. He hadn't expected me to call him out. He hadn't expected me to know the truth. And in that moment, I finally saw what I had been blind to for years. The late-night calls, the sudden business trips to places he never explained, the strange way he would ask about my parents' property taxes or the house deed. It all fit together in a pattern I had refused to see. He had never loved me, not in the way a person should love their partner. He had loved the idea of the house, the money, the security he thought he could steal. And that forgery in the envelope was the final piece of his plan. But he had forgotten one small detail. The house wasn't legally mine to give. I sat there staring at him, feeling a deep, heavy sadness settle into my bones. Not because he wanted to leave me, but because he had never truly stayed. The truth was right in front of me. He hadn't married me for love. He had married me for the house. And now, the mask had finally fallen. When I told Garrett the house was still in my parents' name, it felt like the whole room tilted. His reaction was almost frightening. His face went pale at first, then flushed red, then went pale again, like a man trapped inside a nightmare he had created himself, but couldn't escape. He grabbed the forged house papers from my hands and started flipping through them as though he expected the ink to magically line up with reality. I just sat there watching him, my heart strangely calm. It was the kind of calm that comes after the worst part of a storm, when the damage is already done, and all you can do is see what's left standing. At last, he looked at me with this jittery, nervous smile. "Ruth," he said, voice shaky. Listen, it was just a prank. A joke. I thought you'd laugh. You always say I don't joke enough anymore. A joke. He was really trying to pass off forged signatures, divorce papers, and a whole plan to steal from me as a joke. I just stared at him. He kept talking, filling the silence like he always did when he was caught doing something wrong. His hands moved in wide circles, and he walked back and forth in front of the couch as if pacing would save him. "I saw that online," he said. "You know, that thing where couples prank each other? Thought it'd be funny. I didn't think you'd take it seriously." The more words he poured out, the more obvious it became that he was lying. His voice cracked, his hands shook, and he couldn't look directly at me for more than a second. There was no humor in his eyes. There was panic. Real panic. And suddenly, like pieces of a puzzle snapping into place, my mind began replaying every strange moment of the past 2 years, moments I had brushed aside, moments I had explained away, because that's what love does. Or, at least what I thought love did. I remembered the late-night phone calls he wouldn't explain, the ones where he walked outside even in the freezing cold just so I couldn't overhear. I remembered how he suddenly started paying attention to my parents' old house again, asking questions he had never cared about. "Did your parents ever talk about refinancing? Did they keep the original deed? Have you updated it?" At the time, I thought he was simply curious, maybe even thinking about our future, but now the truth was clear. He had been planning this. Then there were the unplanned business trips to Riverwell, Pennsylvania, to meet a client. The receipts he accidentally left in his pockets showed bars, hotels, and dinners for 2. I ignored it because I believed in our marriage. I chose to trust him. I chose to quiet the voice in my head that warned me something was wrong. Now I saw it without any filter. He had never cared about our marriage. He cared about the house. The house was worth more than I realized. When my parents bought it in Hamilton Creek, property values were low. Now, with new development happening everywhere, it was valued at more than $680,000, and he had been treating it like a prize he could win. He finally sat down across from me, elbows on his knees, hands pressed to his face. "Ruth," he muttered through his fingers, "you're overreacting. You really are. I swear I didn't mean, look, it's been a stressful year. I made a mistake. That's all. But mistakes don't come with forged signatures." I took one slow breath, then another. "Where did you get the signature?" I asked quietly. My voice surprised me. It was steady, Too steady. He dropped his hands, and for a second, his mask slipped. He froze. His mouth opened and closed like he couldn't choose a lie fast enough. Did you forge it yourself? I said. Or did you pay someone? He shot up from the chair and snapped. Why does it matter? I told you it was a joke. But it wasn't a joke. Not even close. I stood too, because sitting felt impossible. My whole body trembled, but not from fear. From clarity. You are going to divorce me and take the house, I said. Saying it out loud made my chest tighten, but it also made the truth impossible to ignore. That was your plan. He stared at me, frozen. His jaw clenched. That was all the answer I needed. Then, he did something that disgusted me even more than the forged papers. He reached for my hand. Ruth, he said, voice suddenly soft. Baby, come on. I love you. I've loved you since the day we met. You know that. I pulled my hand away before he could touch me. He blinked, and for the first time I saw the real him, not the husband I thought I knew, not the man I once loved, but the man who thought he could trick me, the man who thought I was naive, the man who thought he was smarter than me. His expression twisted slightly, as if he was trying to decide whether to keep pretending or to show the anger underneath. I didn't mean for you to find out like this, he whispered. That was the moment I knew he was guilty. He didn't say he didn't do it. He only said he didn't plan for me to find out. My throat tightened. How long? I asked. How long have you been planning this? He didn't answer. How long, Garrett? My voice broke on the last word. Finally, he looked away and said nothing. Silence can be a confession too. Although my heart was breaking, something else inside me hardened. I saw the truth, so clearly it hurt. He was never going to admit it. He was never going to apologize honestly. He only cared that his plan fell apart. He sank back down into the chair and put his head in his hands again. But now I didn't feel sorry for him. I felt sorry for myself for all the years I gave him, for the trust he didn't deserve, for the love he used as a shield while planning to betray me. I walked toward the hallway, needing to get away from him, needing air that wasn't filled with lies. As I reached the doorway, he called out behind me, Ruth, please, don't do anything stupid. I froze, turned slightly, and stared at him. I'm not the one who did something stupid, Garrett. His face twisted, almost like he wanted to get angry, but didn't know how to without exposing everything. He leaned back in the chair, defeated. And for the first time in our entire marriage, I saw him without the charm, without the smooth voice, without the fake warmth. I saw him for who he truly was. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that nothing between us could ever be the same again. I barely slept after the night his plan fell apart. The house was silent, but my mind wasn't. I lay awake replaying every moment, every word, every lie I'd ignored for the sake of keeping our marriage alive. The realization that the person I had lived with for 7 years had been building a trap for me was almost too heavy to carry. I felt it pressing down on my chest like a weight. Long before dawn, I sat up, swung my legs off the bed, and knew I needed to leave the house, if only to breathe air that wasn't soaked in betrayal. Before the sun came up, I grabbed my keys and drove away from Bentonville. I didn't know where I was going at first. I just followed the highway until I saw a sign for Fairmont Springs, a quiet town I had never visited before. The name sounded peaceful, soft, like water in a place where nothing could hurt me. So I took the exit. Snow had dusted the town overnight, covering the rooftops and sidewalks with a thin white blanket. The streets were nearly empty, and the morning sky carried a pale, gray glow. I parked outside a cafe called Maple and Stone, a small building with warm lights in the windows and a wooden sign that creaked when the wind touched it. Inside, the air smelled like cinnamon and fresh bread. I ordered a cup of coffee and settled into a corner booth by the window. As the steam rose from the cup, I watched snowflakes drift lazily past the glass, falling without hurry. I wished I could fall like that, weightless, unburdened. But my thoughts were anything but light. Garrett's face kept flashing in my mind. The shock when I told him the house wasn't legally mine, the panic when he realized his plan had failed, and the anger, Yes, the anger, when he understood he wouldn't get the house. He hadn't looked heartbroken or hurt. He had looked betrayed that his plan had betrayed him. That truth cut deeper than the divorce papers. It was the moment I finally accepted something I had tried so hard not to see. He had married me for the house, not for love. I was a stepping stone, a path leading him to something he wanted more than he ever wanted me. I sat in the cafe for a long time, warming my hands on the coffee cup and letting the truth settle in. At some point, a woman with short blonde hair and a friendly smile walked by my table and nodded at me. She didn't know me, but she saw something in my face, maybe the sadness or the exhaustion, and she paused. "Are you all right, dear?" she asked gently. I almost cried right there, but I swallowed it, took a breath, and said, "I will be."
And I meant it.
For the first time in a very long while, I actually meant it. When I left the cafe, I didn't drive home. Instead, I drove to Creston Hill, a town about an hour away, where I remembered seeing a law office years ago when I visited a friend. I found the small brick building near the city center with a brass plaque that read, "Lowe and Hartwell Legal Services." I walked inside, my nerves shaking, but my mind steady. The receptionist led me to an office where a woman in her early 50s sat behind a desk cluttered with files and thick books. She had warm eyes, steel gray hair pulled into a neat twist, and an energy that felt strong but comforting. She introduced herself as Margaret Lowe. I told her everything, every detail, every word Garrett had said. I told her about the forged signatures, the house papers, his lies, and how he claimed it was all a joke. Margaret didn't interrupt. She listened with a focused expression, her hands folded neatly on the desk. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair, exhaled slowly, and said, "Ruth, what your husband did is illegal. Forging signatures, drafting fraudulent property transfer documents, those are serious offenses. You have every right to file for divorce and protect yourself." Hearing it out loud from someone who understood the law was both painful and empowering. Margaret explained how the forged signature alone could cost Garrett thousands of dollars, possibly even lead to an investigation. She wasn't dramatic about it. She spoke calmly, professionally. But as she talked, I felt something shift inside me, a quiet, deep strength rising from a place that had been ignored for too long. I realized I didn't want to save the marriage. I wanted to save myself. Margaret slid a stack of papers toward me. "If you're ready," she said softly, "we can file today." I looked down at the documents. My hands trembled, but not with fear, with clarity. I picked up the pen, and the moment I pressed it to the page, I felt something open inside me, something that had been locked away under years of compromise and hurt. I filed for divorce that same afternoon. The world outside seemed brighter when I stepped out of the law office. The air felt crisp, sharp, and real. I thought I would feel broken, but instead I felt free. Not fully, not immediately. But the first breath of freedom is something you never forget. When Garrett received the divorce notice, the storm began. He called me more than 50 times that evening. The first message was loud, angry, filled with disbelief. The second was desperate. By the 5th, he was crying. By the 10th, he was bargaining, offering to buy me anything I wanted, a new luxury car, a trip to London, jewelry worth $10,000, anything he thought would calm me down. But I didn't want his money. Money was the very thing that corrupted his love. Money was the heart of every lie he told. I wanted something he couldn't give me: honesty, peace, and the life I deserved. By the time he left the 50th message, his voice was hoarse and exhausted. He said he was sorry. He said he never meant to hurt me. He said losing me would destroy him. But he had already destroyed us long before the divorce papers ever appeared in that silver-wrapped box. That night, I turned off my phone, sat on the edge of the bed, and finally allowed myself to cry, not because I had lost him, but because I had finally chosen myself. It wasn't weakness. It wasn't failure. It was a beginning. And beginnings often require letting go of the things that were never meant for you. The divorce became final on a cold, gray morning 3 months later in Monterey Grove, Illinois, a quiet city where the courthouse stood like an old stone witness to thousands of broken promises. When I walked up the courthouse steps, I felt strangely light, as if every step I took was lifting the weight of the last 7 years off my shoulders. Inside, the hallways echoed softly, and the smell of old paper and polished floors filled the air. It felt like a place where truth lived, even when people tried to hide from it. Garrett was already in the courtroom when I entered. He stood near the front, shoulders slouched, looking smaller than I had ever seen him. His suit, which he usually wore with too much pride, seemed to hang loosely on him, as if it no longer belonged to him. The moment he saw me, his expression shifted: anger, pain, regret, something fake, all mixed together. But none of it moved me anymore. When the judge began speaking, Garrett tried to turn the moment into a performance. He told the judge that he still loved me, that he had made a mistake, that he never meant to hurt me, and that he just wanted a second chance. He said the sentences as if he had practiced them in front of a mirror. He said them with the kind of emotion that sounds real to strangers, but empty to the person who knows the truth. He told his lawyer it was all just confusion. He told the judge it was a misunderstanding. He told me, quietly, with eyes he tried to soften, that he would do anything to get me back. But I didn't believe a single word. His voice felt like a distant radio signal, something you can hear but no longer connect to. His lies had drained the last drop of trust out of me. The person standing in that room was a stranger wearing my husband's face. The judge reviewed everything swiftly. The forged signature, the fraudulent property papers, the attempts to manipulate me. Garrett looked more and more defeated as each piece of truth landed on the table. And with every revelation, I felt something inside me loosen. It wasn't joy. It wasn't bitterness. It was release. When the final words came, divorce granted, my chest expanded in a breath I didn't realize I had been holding for years. I walked out of the courtroom without looking back. The heavy door closed behind me with a soft thud that felt like the end of a long book I no longer needed to read. Outside, the cold morning air greeted me like a friend. I inhaled deeply, letting the crisp wind fill my lungs. For the first time in years, I felt alive. Truly alive. I didn't lose a house that day because it had never legally been mine. But I gained something far more important: my freedom. A month later, I moved to Brighton Shores, a small coastal town on the eastern side of America. I had visited it once years ago and remembered how peaceful it felt. The sound of the waves, the wide open sky, the smell of salt in the air. It felt like a place where a new life could begin. With my own savings, money I had earned from years of work, I bought a small white cottage near the water for $210,000. It was simple, nothing fancy, but it belonged to me in a way nothing ever had. The cottage had 2 bedrooms, a tiny kitchen with blue tiles, and a living room with a large window facing the ocean. The backyard held enough space for a small garden, and the gate opened to a sandy path leading directly to the shoreline. On my first night there, I spread a blanket on the living room floor, sat with a cup of tea, and listened to the waves rolling in. For the first time in a very long time, I didn't feel afraid of the future. In the weeks that followed, I painted the walls myself, a soft cream color that made the rooms feel warm even on cold days. I planted roses in the backyard, something I had always wanted to do in my marriage, but never felt supported in. Each rosebush felt like a small promise to myself, a reminder that I could grow things again. Living alone was strange at first. There were nights when the silence felt heavy, and mornings when I woke up still expecting to hear Garrett moving around. But slowly, the silence became comforting. It became mine. I learned how to cook meals only I liked. I learned that I could fix things in the house by watching simple videos online. I learned how to enjoy my own company without feeling lonely. I met my neighbors too, a kind older woman named Judith Meyer, who baked lemon cake and insisted on sharing it with me, and a retired teacher named Henry Whitlock, who walked his golden retriever past my house every morning. They treated me with a warmth that felt genuine, without expectations or hidden intentions. They didn't know my past, and they didn't need to. They accepted me just as I was. Ruth, the woman rebuilding her life. Sometimes people ask me how my marriage ended. They don't ask with judgment or curiosity, just gentle interest, the way people want to understand someone they care about. I always answer them honestly. My husband gave me divorce papers as a gift. But the real gift was finding out the truth. When I say it, there's no pain in my voice anymore. Just clarity. Because the truth freed me. It taught me that love without respect isn't love at all. It taught me that trusting myself is more important than trusting someone who doesn't deserve it. And it taught me that starting over, even in the darkest moment, can lead to something better than anything you left behind. Now, when I wake up in my cottage and hear the ocean waves, I feel grateful. When I walk through my backyard and see the roses I planted blooming one by one, I feel proud. When I sit on the porch swing at sunset, watching the golden light stretch across the water, I feel whole. I'm not the woman who once stayed silent for the sake of keeping a marriage alive. I'm not the woman who ignored the signs. I'm not the woman who doubted her own strength. I'm Ruth, stronger, wiser, and finally living in a home that belongs to me, not because someone tried to take it away, but because I chose it, earned it, and built my future inside it. And this time, no one can take it from me.